Okay, let's get started. Apologies for this delay.
Yes, I can hear you.
Perfect. Let's get started. Thanks to everyone online and in the room. Thanks for your patience. So welcome to Parallel Sessions 2.3, which brings together a number of papers that were selected, competitively selected from across the globe to present at this conference on biodiversity and sustainable development on the topic of mainstreaming biodiversity with an eye to the impact of innovation on funding ecosystem preservation efforts. Now, I'll cut the introduction very short, so we still have time for everyone to present. We have 5 papers from across the globe. We have 2 papers from Cameroon, 1 from Egypt, 1 from Morocco, and 1 from Vietnam. Unfortunately, some of the presenters could not get a visa, so they're joining us online. So thanks for staying up late to present and participate remotely. So let's just get started. I'll just ask you to keep your presentation to 10 minutes, and I'll give you a sign when you have 2 minutes left. The presentations are very different. I've seen them. Some are very long, some are shorter. Just make sure whatever you present, that in 10 minutes, the audience needs to know exactly what is your research question. How do you decide to answer it? What are your findings? What is the answer that came out of the project? And last, well, maybe if we have time, we'll do a round of comments on that. What does mainstreaming biodiversity in the context of your study, what does it mean? Okay. So let's start with Till Nchofung from Cameroon. His paper is on green finance, environmental policies, stringency, and biocapacity in Africa. Till, the floor is yours. You have 10 minutes. You can share your screen, and we're all ears.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Greetings to all the co-panelists. I'm sorry I could not make it due to visa issues, but thank God we are all here. Please, I'm using my mobile phone, so I will share from my mobile phone. I hope it will not be that bad.
We can also, we have your presentation, so we can also kind of control it from
yes,
here.
It's better you share that way than I'm just presenting. Yeah, it will be better from there.
So it's on the screen.
Please, can you center it?
Can you see your presentation?
Yes, I can see it now.
Okay, just let us know when you need us to change slide.
Okay. You can put it on full screen, please. Can you put it on full screen?
Yes, we're working on it.
So thank you. As said, my presentation is, please, from the beginning. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, my presentation is on green finance, environmental policy stringency, and biocapacity in Africa. And it is co-authored by Awal Wirajing of the University of Nchang in Cameroon and Elanya Nduka of the University of Warwick in the United Kingdom. To begin with, slide please. Slide please. Slide. Yeah, to begin with, Africa's climate finance needs is very enormous, and between 2020 to 2030, it was estimated that Africa needs about $2.5 trillion or an annual requirement of $250 billion to meet its climate needs. And as of 2020, only 12% of this amount was mobilized, according to the Climate Policy Initiative report. And it is equally worth noting that the continent has great potential in terms of mobilizing climate finance. And a lot of efforts are being put in place to see that this is realized. For instance, by the close of 2022, the global pension fund assets in the continent in 22 largest markets had reached a historic high of 56.6 trillion US dollars, while private equity funds under administration had amounted to 6.3 trillion US dollars, according to the African Development Report of 2023. Slide, please. Also, slide, please. Next slide. Yes, equally, over 50% of the African eco-region have lost 50% of their land due to agriculture, expansion, urbanization, just to name a few. And this has led to ecological deficits in the continent in the past years. Africa's ecological footprint stood at 1.35 hectares per person in 2018, significantly lower than the global average of 2.8 hectares per person. Also, the biocapacity of the continent stood at only 1.15 hectares per person, which is a significantly disturbing situation for the environmental sustainability on the continent. And so, to facilitate a sustainable environmental impact of green finance on the continent, please, next slide. To facilitate a sustainable environmental impact of green finance on the continent, stringent environmental policies are actually needed to be implemented. This policy instrument is one of the multilateral endeavors that can help in combating the negative consequences of climate change on the Earth's surface. In the past, some studies have argued that reducing human pressure on the environment has led to reduction in ecological footprint, whereas others have advocated for policies that the biocapacity of ecosystem, that other studies have rather advocated for policies that augment the biocapacity of ecosystem as the most efficient approach of combating climate change. Next slide, please. And it is in this regard, next slide, please, that we set two principal objectives for this study. The first objective is to investigate the impact of green finance on biocapacity in Africa, and equally to discuss the modulating effect of stringent environmental policies on the relationship between green finance and biocapacity within the African context. This study has two principal contributions. Firstly, the research represents a pioneering effort to comprehensively assess the joint influence of stringent environmental policies and green finance on biocapacity, and equally, it is the first study, to the best of our knowledge, on exploring the moderating influence of stringent environmental policies on the relationship between climate finance and environmental sustainability. Next slide, please. In terms of methodology, the data was collected from three principal sources: from the OECD database, the Yale University database, and the World Development Indicators. Two models were specified, and in each case, biocapacity was the dependent variable, and green finance and environmental stringency are key explanatory variables of interest. In the second model, we included an interactive variable between environmental stringent policy and green finance to test the indirect effect. And three estimation approach were used in order to assess our hypothesis. First, we used the fixed effect Briscoe-Cray standard error correction estimator and the panel corrected standard error to correct for possible sources of cross-sectional dependence in our to correct for possible cross-sectional dependence in our data. Equally, the system generalized method of moment was used to correct for sources of endogeneity. Next slide, please. And the following results were arrived at. First, green finance has a positive effect. You could just press next to see the arrows that come out, please. Green finance has a positive effect. No, back again here. Green finance has a positive effect on biocapacity in Africa, and this is in line with the results of Doku et al. 2021 for sub-Saharan Africa. And this result can be explained actually by the fact that green finance comes to add in the existing stock of capital within the economy, and this capital can be used for investment in green technologies, which have proven to be efficient in combating climate change and on enhancing environmental sustainability. The positive effect is equally witnessed on the effect of environmental stringent policies on ecological footprint, and this aligns with the result of API et al. For 2023 for OECD economies. Next slide, please. Actually, this effect is robust across alternative specification of biocapacity, including biocropland, biofishing grounds, biobuilding grounds, just to name a few. And when the indirect effect was looked at, next slide, please. When the indirect effect was looked at, please get to next to see the arrow. Just once, yeah. When the indirect effect was looked at, we witness here that green finance interacts with environmental stringent policies, producing positive direct effects and negative indirect effects. However, the positive direct effect outpowers the negative indirect effects, producing positive net effects. At high policy threshold, that is, this positive net effect has nullified at high policy threshold of about 59 or closely to 60. It is worth noting here that the stringent policy variable varies between 0 and 100, with 100 indicating high stringent environmental policies. So at about 60, the effect becomes...
Time is up, so if you can just wrap up in 30 seconds, that would be great.
Okay, let me just conclude then. The last slide, please. So as policies recommendation, with this study, African nations should fortify their environmental policies, incorporating mechanisms that impose costs on exploiting land, forests, and water bodies. Equally, it is imperative to promote policies that optimize the efficiency of productive areas, including the judicious utilization of fertilizers. And lastly, to explore and consider the various climate finance options available, including debt for climate swap deals, which have yet to be effectively implemented across the continent. Thanks for your keen attention.
Just for the audience, in a sentence, can you actually define biocapacity?
Please come again.
Yeah, we've been listening a lot about, we've heard you talk a lot about biocapacity, but can you just, in a sentence, define biocapacity for the audience here?
Please, I can't hear you well.
You can hear me? Okay. Let's move on and then we'll come back to you. Thank you very much, T. Okay. Is the mic connected? Yeah. Okay. So sorry, you can hear us, but we can hear you very well. So thank you, T. Let's give an applause, a round of applause to T, and we will come back to the key questions of later. So let's go straight to the second researcher who's going to present her research, Muriel Foucault, also from Cameroon. And the title of the research is Assessing the Role of Top-Down and Bottom-Up Institutional Change in Shaping the Environmental Performance of Developing Countries. Muriel, are you online? Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Perfect. We are uploading your presentation on the screen here, and you have 10 minutes. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Please, can you center the presentation?
Can 1 second. Very nice. Okay. Here we go. Can you see the presentation now?
Yes, I can see. Thank you. Please, the first slide. Okay. Thank you, Mr. the Chairman, for giving me the floor. My presentation is based on assessing the role of top-down and bottom-up institutional change in shaping the environmental performance of developing countries. This paper is written together with my professor, Professor Monjeli Mwanjoku. Next slide, please. So my presentation will be based on the background, the contribution of the study, data and empirical strategy results, and conclude at the end. Next slide, please. With respect to the background, we can say that climate change is today considered as a global problem affecting both developed and developing countries. Indeed, due to growing ecological pressure linked to increasing demand for energy, food, water, as well as decreasing biocapacity, majority of developing countries today are experiencing ecological deficits. Following data from the World Bank Development Indicators, we can observe that carbon dioxide emissions keeps on increasing over time, which contribute to further degradation in environmental conditions. According to Ulam Kim 2021, almost half of the world's wild species could become extinct in the coming decades if the inverse relationship between economic growth and biodiversity continues. This therefore brings out the importance of dealing with the problem of environmental performance, as environmental performance constitutes major objectives of the Sustainable Development Goals. Next slide, please. However, what we observe from the statistics is that the level of environmental performance in majority of developing countries remains low. From the graph, we can observe that on average, most developing countries are found between the range 47 and 49, which is far below the average level of the Environmental Performance Index. Next slide, please. This therefore questions the importance of working on environmental performance. We therefore need to understand what are the factors that will explain the environmental performance of different countries over the world, and most particularly those of developing countries. The literature identifies several factors such as renewable energy, human capital from direct investment, amongst others. And one of the less regarded determinant is on the institutional factor. Our work is mostly based on the role played by institutional change in shaping the environmental performance of different countries. We make a distinction between top-down measures and bottom-up measures. By top-down measures, we refer to all those measures that will emanate from the top leaders, while bottom-up are all those measures, or bottom-up institutional change is that institutional change that arises from the population. For example, at a constitutional level, we can see that the states can enshrine the right to a healthy environment in their constitutions. That's the case, for example, for Ecuador, which since 2008 have given the nature the same rights as the humans, which provides a legal environment and a legal recourse for the citizens in that country to force political leaders to take action for the climate and also to take legal actions against polluters. Please, next slide. As such, from the top-down perspective, we can see that political leaders can put in place different measures that aim at improving the environmental well-being of the country, either through a constitutional means or maybe through simply an installment of a new law. On the other hand, the population also has an important role to play in the fight against environmental degradation. For example, citizens through their different protests could incite the government to protect the environment in case maybe the leader in power doesn't have as prior objective the protection of the environment. This can be done through the recycling of our household dirt, the use of solar energy, and so on and so forth, which therefore all contribute to better environmental performance. Please, next slide. As I earlier said, therefore, the aim of this study is to analyze the effects of institutional change from both a top-down and from a bottom-up perspective on environmental performance. The existing literature mostly focus their attention on institutional quality measures, such as corruption, government effectiveness, political instability, which cannot be considered as institutional change measures. With respect to, and in these different studies, most of the authors make use of environmental performance indicators such as the carbon dioxide emissions. Some used the biodiversity, ecological footprints, and all the like, which reduce or doesn't take into consideration the multidimensional concepts of environmental performance, which also include aspects such as air quality, water quality, climate change even, and so on and so forth. Please, next slide.
Muriel, just we have 3 minutes left, and you still have 10 slides to go. So maybe you want to skip a few.
Yes.
So hear about your findings.
Okay. We therefore contribute to this study by analyzing the effects of both top-down and bottom-up approaches of institutional change on environmental performance. Next step, to therefore attain our objectives, we base our empirical methodology. Next slide, please. Our empirical methodology on 3 main estimation techniques, notably the fixed effects of the scoring query, the quanti-instrumental variable technique, and as well as the generalized methods of moment. Our data are issued from the Yale Center of the Environmental Law and Policy with respect to our descendant variable, while institutional change variables are gotten from Bushenstorff and raw data, as well as the ANS conflict location and events data projects. Control variables are gotten from the World Development Indicators. Next slide, please.
2 minutes.
Therefore, our results, the results we obtained, please, next slide. Next slide. The results we obtained shows that both top-down and bottom-up institutional change help to improve environmental performance. Particularly, we found that majoritarily political alternation, meaning that the coming into power of a new political leader helps to improve the environmental performance at the level of the top-down, and mostly different political and social protests help to improve environmental performance. We also have tested the different transmission channels through which institutional change could influence environmental performance in developing countries. And we found that foreign direct investment, human capital, as well as renewable energy consumption are important mechanisms to explain this relationship. As a conclusion, as different conclusions and recommendations with respect to this study, we can say that governments of different developing countries could introduce in new laws in their constitution. It aimed at promoting a healthy environment. Moreover, these governments or political leaders should put in place measures that aim at improving environmental literacy, which could enable the different citizens to actively participate in the protection of the environment. Moreover, faced with the effects of foreign direct investment in the relationship, which was found negative, we recommend that different governments should pay more attention on the sector to which foreign direct investment is geared to. So we thank you for your kind attention and came up to the end of our presentation.
Thank you very much, Marielle. Well done on catching up on the slides. That's perfectly on time. Okay, first paper then is by Noran Bayomi, who actually couldn't join us. So we have a co-investigator, Enrique Mantas, who's a graduate student at MIT, presenting the research. Please.
Mic check 1, 2. Sorry, I've just always wanted to do that. Good morning. My name's Enrique Montas, and I'm here to present assessing urban biodiversity trends using satellite imagery. So here's some of my team members on the board, but they couldn't make it today. So there's like a couple facts that we've heard like a couple of times. You know, our urban areas are growing. They've like doubled in size from 1992 till 2020, and the pace is still there because from 2020 projected to 2021 or 2100. Sorry, there's an expected growth between 30 and 180%. Most of this growth is happening in the southern hemisphere, as we know, and this is where a lot of our regions of high biodiversity are going. So what are we going to do to help manage this? We have satellite imaging and other like remote sensing technologies, along with clustering and other computational algorithms to help us try and keep up and make sure we're able to manage everything as it grows. So we know that we need to maintain urban ecosystems, right? That's like pretty well known, especially here. We know that we have remote sensing as like a potential tool. However, there's very limited research applications, especially in an urban context. So our main question is, how are we going to use these remote sensing technologies to help aid in maintaining and managing and helping to improve our urban ecosystems? So where are we looking right now? So for this study, we've taken cities in Colombia, Mexico, and the US. So Enrique, why are you picking those? We have hotspots everywhere. So the US and Mexico, I'll start with those. There's just like a lot of available data for me as like a student at MIT. So it's good to work with that first. And then Colombia, they're at the forefront, just like as a nation in terms of ecological management, especially like for their developing cities. And they also have a bunch that are going under this rapid urbanization, which we know is happening for like both formally and informally. So how are we going to do this? So we have our satellite images that come in. So these are our raw satellite data. We have our land surface temperature, our precipitation, and our NDVI. NDVI is normalized differential vegetation index. Basically how green is something when you look at it. You can think of it like that for now. So what we do is we now take our shapefiles for all of our cities that we want to look at. We cut them out of the image to get our values. We put these into tables. We do a little like data cleaning, and we're just going to find some trends, you know, like what cities are increasing, what cities are decreasing, like just to get an idea of what's going on. And then we're going to put everything into clusters to see, okay, besides just these two cities are increasing, how similar are they really? Oh, okay. Sorry. Okay, so what is clustering? So I don't know, in case you don't have a computer science background, basically imagine you have like this graph right here, and we have a bunch of points, and we want to say, where are the similar points together? So the way you do it is just the distance of them, and the distance basically represents the like space that we're working in. So for example, like how similar the temperatures, and then you want to find centers to basically say this is like the middle of this area. How do we find our centers? So, or how many centers are we going to use? So basically what we have here is a graph of the within cluster sum of squares against like the total number of clusters. And what we're looking for is when the steepness of the curve begins to drop. And this basically means that we don't have just like super broad clusters that don't really mean too much, and we aren't overfitting with too many clusters. So as you can see here, the number of clusters we need to use is 3, because that's kind of where it starts to look like an elbow. So this just ends up being our distribution of points within them. Cluster 0, about 700, about 1,500 in cluster 1, and about 1,000 in cluster 2. So back to the first part where we were checking just like our trends. These are just box and whisker plots of the NDVI trends within the cities. So here on the left, we have all the cities, and you can see like we have a max of about 0.05. The mean is about 0.001, and the min is about negative 0.03. So the median is just above 0. So that means we are technically increasing more than we're decreasing across like all of our data points. But to dive in a little more, we want to see what's going on for our decreasing cities and what's going on for our increasing cities. We split them into 3 different buckets, basically increasing, decreasing, and stabilizing. The way we determined stabilizing was taking the 3rd quartile of the decreasing cities and the 1st quartile of the increasing cities to basically just get like the middle part. And we're going to call that stabilizing. So when we go into our decreasing cities, we can see that obviously they're all decreasing, right? So the max is 0.002, the mean is 0.01, and our min is 0.03. So that's the ones that's decreasing the fastest. When we go to our increasing city, the fastest growing is 0.05, the mean is about 0.01, and our min is 0.001. So it looks like pretty similar to our first graph because it's kind of just, we're just separating there. These are the results of our clustering. So as you remember, we wanted to use 3 because that's where we had our elbow and our elbow method. And cluster A, these are cities that have moderate precipitation, a high temperature, and moderate NDVI compared to the others. So some cities in this cluster were Medellin, Miami, San Jose. Cluster B, these are drier cities. So as you can see, the precipitation is way down. The temperature, however, doesn't really go down. So we're looking more towards like desert, dry areas. So think about like Los Angeles, Richmond, Virginia, and Guadalajara. Our last cluster here is the coldest of the 3, and it has a moderate precipitation. It like rains a little more than the desert, but not as much as like our tropical areas. So here we have like Sacramento, California, Virginia Beach, and New York. So a lot of like our northern cities end up falling here. Just like as a thought experiment, we looked at our sample NDVIs, and we looked at the area of the city to see, hey, maybe like bigger cities just have like more greenery in them because you have more space, but that's not necessarily true. But what we did see is that these cities here have like a really big range. So remember earlier when I was saying you could think of NDVI as just like your general greenery. When you're taking a picture from space of like the Earth and clouds get in the way, it looks a lot less green. So you're going to get like a huge drop. So some cities that have just like a lot of clouds, for example, Miami here, it's just like the range is like pretty huge compared to one of our desert cities like Guadalajara. The range is a lot smaller. Yeah, so I guess that I'm going to get into this later, but that shows like why NDVI is not the perfect metric to do this. So back to like our clusters, we were saying, okay, remember we have our first cluster, which was more tropical, our second cluster, which is more like deserty, and our third one, which is more like our colder cities. So what we have here is that a lot of our tropical cities are increasing, and I mean, that's good, right? We don't want to lose like any of our rainforests, so that's nice to know. And they also have like the least decreasing. So I guess this is because a lot of efforts are being like pushed into like preserving like these areas. And in the data, you can actually see at around 2020, there was like a pretty big world event. I don't know if you guys remember, but like COVID sent us all home for a little while. And I guess everyone being home is good for greenery because it just like went up a little bit like that year. And then everything gets back to like its trends. Our decreasing cities are still decreasing and our increasing are still increasing. So how does this work? What does this mean? So, you know, we can use remote sensing for urban biodiversity management. It's good. We can use NDVI to give us some insights. However, it's not perfect because it's susceptible to things just like cloud cover. But we can use this for rapid assessment because it's low computation cost, the data is publicly available, and we can use this like to get a time view of how our policies are if they're effective or ineffective in what we're trying to do. Clustering also gives us more insights into, hey, like maybe these two cities are a little more similar than you thought. So maybe we can learn from each other and like share some policies or just like general ideas. This is actually, we actually applied this to a case study in Leticia in the Amazon region. And so while Leticia, you know, it has direct access to the Amazon, we have direct access to the river. As I said earlier, Colombia is really trying to like push environmental stuff in their policies, and it fits like the rapid urbanization that we're going through. It also like lets us like get our feet on the ground because, you know, I'm just a kid in Boston with a computer. Like, what do I really know about what's going on over there? So being there is just like good to know, like, okay, how can I like tweak what I'm doing to make sure it fits what we need? So as I was saying, with more data, we can draw more conclusions. And this is actually part of a much larger project called EcoLens. EcoLens basically uses what I like to think of as 3 levels of data. You have your level 1 data, which is like this NDVI. It's like, it's quick, it's easy to use, doesn't take much like computation. And it is, you can like gain some insights from it, but there's some holes in it. 2 would be satellite imaging. So that would be like Google Satellite. And what we're using here is what's called semantic segmentation. So what you do here is you basically like color over this map to say like, okay, these are trees, these are roads, and you train like a computer vision model to get a similar picture and color it for you. With this, you can get new metrics such as like land use percentage. Okay, land use percentage, the like permeable surfaces, which gives us more insights to things we can cluster with. Our level 3 data here is satellite imaging or LiDAR, sorry. And that gives you the most insights because we'll be able to know like, okay, this tree's here, it's this size, and you can classify it as this species. Yeah. I mean, I'll just leave that there. Thank you guys for your attention. Do you have any questions?
Thank you, Rike. We'll move to questions at the end. So our, I think, last presenter for today, because Adnam hasn't connected. Yes, absolutely, is Hind Hurmat Hala. I hope I pronounced that okay. And she's coming from Morocco, and her research is titled "Mainstreaming Biodiversity Conservation into Key Economic Sectors: Evidence from Morocco." So, 10 minutes. The floor is yours, and also the microphone.
And improve, yes, better. Improving knowledge of ecosystem resilience to climate change. The second specific result is that the assessment is insufficient. The assessment of Morocco's progress in achieving the IK target on integrating biodiversity seems insufficient. We have here 4 points that are very important. According to the Red List Index, the risk of species extinction has decreased from 0.91 in 1993 to 0.88 in 2022. And the quantity of illegally caught fish has increased considerably from 196,000 tons in 1978 to 1 million tons in 2018, ranking Morocco second in the world in terms of white fishing, just behind China. The forest ecosystem in Morocco continues to face the detrimental impacts of global warming and human activities. And fourth point, that agricultural sector in Morocco is causing significant harm to biodiversity. This is primarily because farmers have not fully embraced the concept of mainstreaming biodiversity into their practices. The second type of constraints that we should highlight here is the following one. The capacity of bureaucrats charged with personalizing biodiversity integration plans and strategies is very weak. The majority of these people are often unmotivated and lack the knowledge and will to achieve effective change. Many laws relating to biodiversity pose problems of effectiveness because implementing decrees are generally published with considerable delay. And of course, the implementation of certain measures is doubtful. This is the case of a special tax on sand. The purpose of this tax was to curb the exploitation of coastal dunes and beaches. However, it has resulted in many businesses in the formal sector migrating to the informal sector, which is a very serious problem. The mainstreaming of biodiversity into economic sectors involves a multitude of public players. However, the level of coordination among the plans and strategies developed by these entities remains relatively limited. And finally, the level of national scientific knowledge on biodiversity and ecosystems is deemed insufficient, which explains the massive recourse to the services and of foreign experts. So in terms of conclusion, and despite the political will expressed and Morocco's commitments to international efforts to mainstream biodiversity into sectoral policies and strategies, very, very little progress has been achieved. And the responsibility is shared between the various stakeholders involved in these policies and strategies. That's why we consider that any credible and viable sectoral strategy aimed at mainstreaming biodiversity requires a combination of 4 factors. The first one is a long-term vision that prioritizes biodiversity as the core focus of economic, social, and scientific concerns. Second, a dynamic and fruitful debate around the different axes of transformative projects. Third, a widespread shared by the public and other stakeholders. And finally, motivated bureaucrats capable of transforming the dissatisfactions identified into a concrete, effective, and equitable project. Thank you for your attention. I respect my 10 minutes.
Thank you, Hind. I think you were early, in fact. Great. And I don't think, is Nam online? Has he joined? It's... No, I don't think Nam is online. Okay, so I think we'll stop here. We still have 20 minutes for questions. And I'll start maybe, you know, in the audience, please start thinking about questions you want to ask. Of course, these are very different papers, yeah? They're looking at very different context. But I think it's interesting to see what is the minimum common denominator right here, which is a focus on mainstream biodiversity. And I think each paper has identified a different kind of strategy to do this. So of course you're asking your own kind of questions, etc., but you're also kind of pushing a specific strategy. So you're moving from the analytical to the normative, what should happen. So except maybe for the paper of Enrique, and I have a question on that. But in terms of T's presentation, I think what he's suggesting is that, this, what I understand this biocapacity to be is kind of a synthetic indicator at the national level, right? But maybe T you can tell us more about that. And I guess the idea is that a synthetic indicator can actually hold people accountable or help put an issue on the center stage of policy debates, and hopefully also public debates. In case of Muriel, I think it's clear that the objective was actually to engage citizens, right? To show that bottom-up initiatives are as effective, apparently, as top-down initiatives. So I think that's another strategy. We want to mainstream biodiversity, we need to engage people, right? In case of Hind, I love the motivated bureaucrats. I think that is actually applies to to so many different policy domains, but I think it's an excellent point. But you also talked about state capacity in the end, because you say, there's excellent legislation in place, but it's still just maybe legislation for biodiversity. It's not legislation on other sectors that thinks biodiversity. And you also made a relevant point, at least for GDN's mission, in fact, the fact that we need local research capacity. So Morocco needs local researchers asking their own questions about biodiversity mainstreaming and providing their own answers, as opposed to just keep flying in other researchers. So these are all interesting strategies, strategies to push biodiversity into the mainstream. Yeah. Now, just for Enrique, for your paper, how do you see you're basically testing technology to monitor, biodiversity in urban setting, right? Yeah. So how do you see this contributing to mainstreaming? Do you, for example, is the use of satellite imagery something which is already widespread enough? Yeah, to justify. So basically, if a large city already uses satellite imagery for other things, maybe they can also start using it for biodiversity purposes. So what's the link to mainstreaming in your own views? Perfect, thank you.
Yeah. So in terms of making it like mainstream, so taking like a mainstream technology like satellite imaging, everybody kind of uses Google Maps. So the idea is that if I think like one of the issues with biodiversity management is that we don't have like really consistent ways to like set like baselines and be like, this is like where we want to be at. Like, this is where we are. This is where we're trying to be at. And I think being able to make something to help kind of put everyone on the same page of say like, this is like what we're aiming for in terms of whatever metrics we want to use. And it's just like being able to give everybody the ability to do these metrics at like a low cost or not adding much cost to what they're already doing, I think will help make it like mainstream, because it's like what's around.
Yep, that makes sense. Now, are Tia and Muriel still online? I suppose so.
Yes, we are online.
Yeah. So T, can you answer that question I was trying to ask earlier? How would you define biocapacity in one sentence for people who actually are not expert in this?
Okay, thank you for that question. Okay, yeah, to keep it simple, I would define biocapacity as the ability of the ecosystem to produce renewable resources and at the same time absorbing waste resulting from human activities. So, I don't know whether that is...
The audio is not great. Can you repeat that?
I would define biocapacity as the ability of the ecosystems to produce renewable resources and at the same time absorbing waste resulting from human activity on the ecosystem, such as carbon dioxide.
Okay, that's clear. Now let's open to the floor. I'll check if there are questions online, but yeah, please.
Thank you very much. Very interesting presentations and research. My name is Carolina Rosero. I work at Conservation International here in Ecuador. And I have two questions, if the chair permits. My first question is for Enrique. Very interesting use of technology, existing technology that I think is very readily available. And just wondering if you've thought about, how can we use that information on biodiversity and what it means for green spaces, but not just green spaces, but for example, permeable surfaces that allow for reduced cost in flood management, for example, for cities, or vegetation contributing to improved air quality and reduction in health impacts, negative health impacts that cities might have. Just trying to put myself in the shoes of decision makers who have funds and making that more kind of economic case for increasing biodiversity in urban settings and what that might imply for the cities. So that's my question to you, Enrique, if that's clear. Okay. And then my second question was for you. I'm sorry, your name was Hindu. Yes, Hind. Yes. And I think this also ties into the other presentation on top down versus bottom up. I think in Ecuador, one of the main challenges that we've had as far as policy design and biodiversity in policy is that it's been very centralized, so managed by the national government. And there's the challenge is in having other sectors buying into that and being able to demonstrate their contributions to these national commitments internationally, and not just having that centralized with the national government. So just wondering if you have any insight on what that might look like with involving the other sectors, public sector, civil society, or private sector and civil society, and contributing to those policies that are managed by national governments.
Great. Let's take another question. Yes, Rishi?
Sure, thanks. So Hind, my question is also to you. I see you use the IT targets in the strategic plan. I'm wondering how different would it look if you use the Kunming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework with the 23 action-oriented targets, the 4 goals. Would there be a different picture or a similar kind of recommendations that you make? Thanks.
Yes, let's do the first round of answers. You go, Enrique.
Okay. So to make sure I understood your question correctly, it's so the more basically the usefulness in getting more numbers to be able to predict like new things. Okay, yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so basically the way I would say it if I was pitching it to a decision maker would be we can kind of like provide the ability to say these are like, it goes back to finding like similarities in other places, right? So if we say right now your situation is like similar to this other place, like at this point in time, they did these things and had these effects. And I mean, like, I don't know how much more I could do besides like taking their hand and forcing them to sign something. But I think it's just like I was saying before, just the more information we give people, the more informed decisions they can make. And I think that's like the best like we can do like right now. But I guess, yeah, with it depends how much they want to like invest in it, right? Because in theory, you can get like numbers for everything, and then you could like perfectly like map the world, and then that goes into just like super high like computation stuff. So it comes down to how much you want to invest in it, and I guess you can just use information as a tool, and that's all we can do to try and help them drive their decision making.
So thank you very much for your interesting questions. And for the first one, Yes, involving other sectors, yes, I agree with that. But in Morocco, there is a huge gap between how policymakers perceive the mainstreaming of biodiversity into key economic sectors and what is happening in reality. So, but I believe that the successful implementation of biodiversity mainstreaming, that requires two conditions. The first one is democratic institutions. It depends on the quality of institutions, and you have said that. And second one is economic incentives. So we have to implement these two conditions to have the involvement of all sectors and to have a good mainstreaming of biodiversity. And yes, for IK targets, unfortunately, those targets has not been achieved yet. But fortunately or unfortunately, it depends. We have some targets that was really achieved, but we need to do more. And to do it, we have to pass by unmotivated bureaucrats and to do something against that, and also to sensibilize the society against the urgent situation to mainstream biodiversity in their practices, in the practice of society. So I hope that I respond to your questions. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Other questions? Oh, Muriel, please. Sorry, I didn't see your hand up.
Okay, thank you for giving me the floor. Just to continue with the answer of my predecessor, is to say that among the different economic incentives to maybe taxing, there is a new law that they are trying to implement at Châtellerault in France. They are taxing household dirt, meaning that the more you recycle your dirt, the less you pay tax. That's a way to incent citizens to contribute in the protection of the environment. So there are several other measures that goes in this way that enables a bottom-up change and enable to achieve better environmental performances.
Thank you, Muriel. What I find interesting in the discussion is that ultimately what we're saying is that to get to a point where biodiversity is mainstream, we actually need to focus on things which are not biodiversity, right? So data, capacity to use technology, state capacity, and kind of bureaucracy, because obviously unmotivated bureaucrats or unengaged citizens, like Muriel was saying, are not just unmotivated about biodiversity or unengaged only about biodiversity. So it's about in public debate, the quality of public debate. Obviously, it's not just about biodiversity, right? It's not that quality of public debate and everything else is absolutely top notch, right? It's about bringing these issues out there and having capacity, within the state and outside to
exactly.
State capacity and also administrative capacity in some sense. Rika wants to come in, and there's a follow-up question from Deshni.
I just wanted to add something to what you were just saying. I think kind of something common between all of our presentations is that we're able to just get everyone on like the same page and just educate everyone, because we can all go around and say, oh, we need to like conserve our biodiversity, and then I don't know, someone would just sit there like, why? And then being able to just answer that question, as simple as it is, to make sure everyone understands what's going on. It starts, you can do it top down, you can do it bottom up. We just heard the talk on that. We can make sure we have all of like our decision makers on the same page, pushing this way, but we can also put pressure on them by making sure that everyone around us is like committed to also wanting to do this, because that is what also helps drive like the decision makers.
Yeah, and I think we all agree on that. The question is how we do that. Right, how we get people motivated, etc. Deshni, please.
Yeah, so I just wanted to add from our experience of 20 years of mainstreaming, that it's about changing the language. That was the biggest finding. We've done quite a lot of research on how, because we've had a lot of investment in the last 20 years, and for the first like 10-15 years, we had a lot of money going into the sector, and we were trying to convince everybody around us, but we were still speaking biodiversity language. And in the last 5 to 10 years, we've started changing So we've done work on making the case for biodiversity. We did market research, and we found that you need to have, so it's heart, hands, head. So you need to have a message that really speaks to people at heart level, have a rational kind of intervention. And then the hands is a collective call to action. And so we've started deliberately working with sectors like the development planners. And so a lot of the work, there's another slide that I often use in my presentations. There's the 90-10 split. So you have your product, you'll have your tool, your map, your whatever it is, and that's just 10% of the issue. The 90% is actually getting people to understand it, to use it. And often you can make that smaller if you've co-developed that product with them. And so we put a lot of effort into hand-holding, going to meetings, doing presentations, and really, so whichever sector you're working with, to really co-develop a tool for them, not your tool for them, but their tool for them. So a lot of that extra effort, so that thing on capacity, yeah, that's really where our efforts need to be going into, because we need to be developing that capacity where it's needed. Yeah, thanks.
I don't know if everybody was at the plenary where you talked about Deshnipi Live from Sambi. South Africa is lucky because you have an institution, so you have direct access to all the ministry, because you are a national institution, so it has that as a mandate to advance biodiversity through research and policy advice. T, please come in.
Yes, thank you again. It is actually going in line with what the previous speaker was talking about. The first thing is we are good at holding conferences, holding meetings, publishing excellent papers, and those who have to implement the policies in those papers or from conference proceedings are always absent in such conferences. For instance, we are in Ecuador, and if we ask how many government ministers in developing countries or developed countries are actually invited, are present, that these policies they could take back to in their various countries and try to implement them, we'll see that that is not being done. And so my principal recommendation there would be to actually take the policies to those who have to implement it, and not actually leaving them in paper or discussing them in conferences and ending them there. So that is just what I had to add.
Thanks. About that, I'm not entirely convinced, because in a way, what we're saying throughout the panel is that we don't need to give a direct access to policymakers, to researchers. I mean, the key is not just creating this kind of direct channel of communication between the researcher and the policymakers. It's about recognizing that researchers, even for the researchers, just % of the work, and then we're talking about strengthening systems, right? Strengthening systems. Strengthening data systems, etc. So yes and no. I don't think the policymakers in the room would necessarily translate into new policies. I'm a big part of the idea that research actually contributes to the richness and quality of public debates, and from there, then you have policy discussions, right? So we don't need to give privileged access to policy researchers. We actually need to make sure that knowledge that is produced from research makes it to public debate, makes it to the public space, right? However sophisticated it is in the back end, has to be communicated. And once it's in the public debate, let the public debate inform and hold as an top of the hour. So unless there's any last comments that anyone wants to make, I think we'll thanks a lot, everyone, all the presenters, of course, online and in person. Thanks to the audience. I forgot to introduce myself, I realize. So everybody was calling me Mr. Chairman. Nice. No, actually, people know my name. Francesco Bino, Director of Research and Programs at the Global Development Network. Thanks everyone for attending this conference.